The most fun thing for me about MMA is finding new prospects, young upcoming fighters who take over and continue the evolution of the sport. The last time I made one of these videos was back in 2019, and as I show you right here, you could see how well each prospect of each division that I picked has done throughout the time. A couple fighters not doing too well, most of them rising in the rankings, becoming title challengers or ranked contenders in major organizations, and even two of them becoming champions in their organizations such as Ciryl Gane, picking him before he was even in the UFC. 2 years later, he became the interim champion, and Roberto Saldich becoming a double champ in KSW. It's always super fun to scout out these younger fighters and follow the path of them doing great things in the sport. Now, we're going right into 2022, and man, there's a load of prospects for each division. It's crazy. It's way different than when I did it before. There are several fighters I could pick as the #1 prospect of each division, and honestly, man, some of them I have to pick two. It was way too difficult. So for a few of the divisions, I'm gonna pick 2 prospects instead of 1. Besides maybe the female divisions where there's not too many fighters, I'm gonna try to avoid UFC top 15 fighters, Bellator 1 Championship top 5 fighters, and other major organizational champions, such as KSW for an example. And I'm also gonna try to keep the fighters under 30 years old, except maybe for the heavyweight division where even 30 is pretty young. Starting off the list, we're gonna go with the lightest division, the strawweight division, and man, for this division there were so many good prospects, I had to pick 2. The first one, we're gonna start with Jasmine Yaragway, fighting over there in Combate America. She's 22 years old, undefeated, and the biggest thing you could probably see in some of these stats here is 6 knockouts for a strawweight. That is incredible, and it's actually a trend with the prospects of the female divisions. Almost all of them hit hard, and Jasmine is no exception. She's mostly a boxer, has incredible balance in her punches, incredible form in her punches, her leg kicks are decent, her takedown defense is impeccable, she's extremely strong in the clinch, and extends perfectly in her 1-2 combination. Sometimes she'll keep her head up tall, and the rotation in her head kicks isn't all the way there, but she's going to be one of the hardest fighters to exchange with in the strawweight division, especially when she makes her way to those major organizations. Her boxing skills and power are definitely going to be a big difference in some of her biggest fights. And the other top prospect in the strawweight division is going to be a UFC fighter, Luana Pinheiro, who's a bit older, 28 years old, 10-1. She may be infamous for flopping against Rana Marcos when she got upkicked. It looked like a clear act, but that's not to diminish her skills. Just like Jasmine, Pinheiro has insanely good power. Most fighters do not want to exchange with her, and when they do, because the way a lot of strawweights fight is, they like to blitz down in straight lines, exchange with the opponent, and then eventually when they get close to the cage, they're shooting for a takedown. That meta does not work against Luana, because her power shakes her opponents off almost every single time. And she's a Brazilian judo champion who has transitioned her skills to MMA beautifully. Her tosses, her hip throws, even her head or arm throws, as much as we despise those, are so effective against her opponents, especially against takedowns. Wrestlers have an extremely hard time with Luana because of her anti-wrestling skills using her judo, and the fact that they can't exchange with her on the feet, even though she's not the most technical striker. Her power is pretty outrageous for a strawweight. She is on the older side of all the prospects on this list, but her skills are absolutely promising, and she has the looks for the UFC to promote her very well if she gets further in the rankings. And then we head right into the flyweight division. The fighter I had to pick is the number 14 fighter in the UFC rankings. The reason I had to do that is because there weren't too many great prospects for this shallow division. I could not pass up Manon Fiorot from France, another powerhouse, and not only that, she is huge. For the flyweight division, her attributes give a lot of fighters a difficult time. She's hard to take to the ground, she's hard to get into a clinch with, her power makes such a difference in her fights. She's just way too physical for most of the fighters, and even though she is the oldest fighter on the list, 31 years old, her path to a title shot is going to be shorter than most of the fighters, so even though she is older, she is in a more shallow division, making her easier to realize her potential faster than other fighters. And then we go to the women's bantamweight division, and honestly, this was the hardest division to find a prospect. But we are ultimately going to go with JOSIANE NUNES, who is 28 years old. She's 8-1. She is 5'3" on the shorter side for the bantamweights. She has a long reach for her height, 67 inches, which is actually almost the same as Amanda Nunes, is as crazy as that sounds. But as you can see, an outrageous 7 knockouts. She's very similar to Jessica Andrade. Her stature, the way she throws punches, the way she's super aggressive, the way she overwhelms her opponent in the clinch and also in short range. She's Jessica Andrade with extendo arms. That's pretty much what she is, and she can get far in the division just because of that. Overwhelm the opponent with power and volume, and even punch him out at a farther range. And for the bantamweight division, where technique is not displayed in most areas, she is going to be able to get by, and I do expect her to become a top 10 fighter very soon. And from that, we go from a division with some of the worst prospects in MMA to probably the top prospect in MMA currently, Muhammad MOKAEV for that flyweight division. There's not too many fighters in MMA who has hype as an amateur. Muhammad MOKAEV went 22-0 as an amateur and caught a lot of eyes. Enough eyes to where he got a few wins professionally and the UFC quickly caught him. 21 years old, 6-0, 1 no contest, 2 knockouts, 2 submissions, 2 decisions, and also 5'9" for a flyweight. The guy is probably the most well-rounded fighter on this entire list. He does everything at a high level. He's the flyweight Khabib when it comes to his wrestling. His jiu-jitsu is absolutely insane. He's extraordinary in his scrambling. His boxing technique, his kicking technique, his timing, his movement, everything is on point. And the most promising thing about all of this is he's only 21 years old. The level of technique he's displaying right now, you don't see until guys reach like 26, 27 years old. He has so much more time to get better than where he is currently. I honestly cannot even fathom how good this guy could be in the future. Yes, a lot of people were talking about Aaron Pico when he was like 21 years old, right? He was a good boxer and a good wrestler. MOKAEV is good at everything that Aaron Pico did not have. And he normally doesn't make those drastic mistakes that Aaron Pico made earlier in his career, showing a different level of fight IQ as well. I can absolutely see Muhammad MOKAEV eventually becoming a UFC champion in the future. Super high expectations for this guy. And then we go right into the bantamweight division, and I'm going to be honest here, the bantamweight division has the best prospects in MMA, totally. And what does that also mean? Bantamweight is going to surpass lightweight, 100%. Maybe in the next 5 years, bantamweight will become the #1 weight class of the entire sport. There were so many fighters I could have picked from, I had to pick 2. Number 1, we're gonna go with Umar Nurmagomedov, Khabib's cousin. He's also extremely well-rounded, man. He's 25 years old, young, 13-0, 1 knockout, 6 submissions, 6 decisions, 5'8", which is actually shorter than MOKAEV, with a 69-inch reach. Here's the thing about Umar Nurmagomedov. He strikes like Zabit minus the boxing, outside of a very good jab. He wrestles like Khabib, and he grapples like Islam Makhachev. Now the thing about Umar is, you could pretty much already tell that he's mostly a grappler. He's a great submission artist, but his striking is developing, especially his boxing. He's more of a kicker on the feet than anything else. He throws a lot of traditional kicks, from spinning attacks, chambering ground kicks, a lot of front kicks, a lot of side kicks and stuff like that. His boxing is his biggest weakness. It seems like he's not confident enough to really engage with the opponent in the pocket, counter punching them too many times, and really resorts to kicking from a distance to keep them away, and if they find their way in close, he shoots in on the takedown. So there is a pattern to the way he fights, which can be an issue if someone game plans around him correctly, but the grappling is where he's a completely different story. He's a well-rounded grappler. He does everything perfectly. He rides out things just like Khabib does. He has crazy ground and pound, and he snatches onto submission openings just like Islam Makhachev does. He's a clear combination of a lot of Dagestani fighters in one. The second bantamweight prospect, I had to pick Jack Shore. I could not have overlooked him. I was going back and forth between the two. I really only wanted to pick one, but these two guys are so special. I had to put both of them on the list. 26 years old, 15-0, also undefeated, 4 knockouts, 8 submissions, and 3 decisions. Standing at 5'9", which is tall for a bantamweight, and having a 71-inch reach. He's a big guy for this division. And he's also another submission artist, just like Umar is. And that's going to be a bit of a trend for the male divisions. There's a lot of high prospects with crazy good grappling. But the thing about Jack Shore is he's extremely good at being patient and finding his openings and picking out his openings off of his jab and off of his body kicks. When opponents blitz him down is where he has the hardest time, but he's really good at finding his check hooks or clinching up with them to neutralize the aggression and even shooting under for takedowns. I would have to say overall he's more well-rounded than Umar in the fact that he does everything from boxing to kicks to Thai skills in the clinch to wrestling the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He does all of it at a high level, where Umar has all of those skills, especially his grappling I believe is a higher level than Jack Shore's, but his boxing skills are a bit regressed. I definitely expect both Umar and Jack Shore to be top 5 fighters in the future and possibly even fight each other. And we carry on with the quality when we go into the featherweight division, who I believe also could be the top prospect in all of MMA, ILIA TOPURIA. He does everything at a high level. His boxing's incredible, his power's outrageous. He's one of the best at chokes in the featherweight division, from rear naked chokes to guillotine chokes. He's also pretty good with anaconda chokes, but he's becoming much more of a knockout artist these days. His precision in his hands on the back foot is so unique to watch from him. Even some of the best featherweights in the world right now cannot punch like that. He's absolutely incredible in finding his right hand no matter what the position is. He's great at setting things off of his leg kicks. He's never off balance with anything he does. Any coach would be extremely lucky to get ILIA TOPURIA in their gym. I definitely see him being at least a top 5 fighter in the future. And with that, we go in the most stacked division in MMA, the lightweight division. But there's one problem with lightweight. Even though a lot of people see the contenders and they see it as the best division, looking at the prospects, I probably have to say that bantamweight is going to surpass it. But that doesn't mean that lightweight doesn't have one of the best prospects in all of MMA right now, Guram Kutateladze. I can't pick Arman Tsarukyan and I cannot pick Mateusz Gamrot because they're both in the top 15 in the UFC. Guram as crazy as it sounds, is not even ranked yet, even though he has a win over Gamrot. And it just shows how good this guy actually is. He's a close friend and trains with Khamzat Chimaev. They're both progressing at an insanely high level, and his shows and his takedown defense is getting much better these days, defending most of the takedowns against Mateusz Gamrot, who's taken down almost everybody he fights, and that allows Guram to display his superior kickboxing skills. He's one of the absolute best kickboxers in that lightweight division right now. Even though he's not even ranked, he's one of the best overall technical kickboxers, combined with his power, of course, in that division. The thing that allows him to drop or knock out most of his opponents is all in both his sniper-like precision and the heaviness in his shots, making it so hard to block against them. He finds your chin, man. Uppercuts, jabs, right crosses. He finds kicks around your guard. He crushes you with body and leg kicks. Everything he throws has a unique heaviness to it. He doesn't throw at a high velocity, he's not really quick with his strikes, but the heaviness of them just makes even blocking against them difficult. And I absolutely see him being at least a top 7 fighter in the future. And the moment a lot of people have been waiting for, the welterweight division. There's a lot of prospects for this division. And unfortunately, I cannot pick Khamzat Chimaev because he's almost a top 10 fighter. He's not a prospect anymore in my eyes. But there is a guy a lot of the deep hardcore fans know about that might be a huge problem in the future. And that is SHAVKAT RAKHMONOV. He's the same age as Khamzat, 27 years old. He's also undefeated, 14-0. All of his wins are by finish. 7 knockouts, 7 submissions. This follows the trend with the male divisions. A lot of these guys are great grapplers, man. They have really good submissions. He's also extremely big for this weight class. 6'1", 77-inch reach. Besides Neil Magny, I don't think there's any other fighter who has a height and reach like SHAVKAT RAKHMONOV. He's pretty fast for a welterweight. He has crushing power. He's so strong when he gets a hold of you. And not even attribute-wise. His technique is on another level with everything he does. Besides, I would say, merely boxing defense. Doesn't really move his head that much, stands pretty tall when he throws punches. He tends to drop his hands and his shoulders, exposing his head, and he's gotten hurt in the past because of this. But everything else he's almost perfect in. His kicks are perfect in technique, his punching technique offensively is on point, his wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu are beautiful to watch, and especially his chokes from any position, standing or on the ground, are always a threat against anybody in the world, and it combines with his height advantage against most of the fighters. He needs to break your posture just a little bit, and he's snatching onto that guillotine. SHAVKAT RAKHMONOV has the potential, as long as he doesn't get caught too often, he does have the potential to fight for a belt one day. And then we go into the middleweight division. And I'm not gonna lie, middleweight is looking pretty dicey in the future. Not a lot of great prospects. There weren't a lot of amazing prospects to look at. Without including Andre Muniz, I'm probably have to set my sights on Bellator when I look at DALTON ROSTA, who is a young 26-year-old, 5-0, 3 knockouts, no submissions, 2 decisions. He's 6', 74-inch reach. He has a good height for the middleweights, a little bit short on the reach, but the man is built like a brick house. He is so strong, and not only that, he's so fast for a middleweight. It's crazy to watch. And honestly, his style reminds me a lot of Michael Chandler, the way he fights, the way he stands, the way he pursues the body shots and attempts his takedowns. He has a really good takedown defensive game, and he just explodes into his 1 or 2 shots instead of extending it to combinations. And his boxing defense so far has looked pretty stellar, man. At the level he's fighting right now, most of the fighters cannot connect on him that cleanly, and it's because of how patient and ready he is to find his counter shots. It's very difficult for fighters to engage with him because he keeps all of his strikes extremely tight. He doesn't give many openings when he's on the offensive. Bellator found themselves a great prospect to build that middleweight division, and then sadly we go to the light heavyweight division. And just like middleweight looked pretty dicey for the future, light heavyweight doesn't look too different, man. Not a lot of great prospects, and it took me a pretty long time to actually find one to put on the list. A lot of people look at someone like Luke Trainer, right? He fights in Bellator. He's so big for that division. He's 6'6". He's a great grappler, and a lot of guys are gonna have a hard time scrambling with him, but his striking is almost completely underdeveloped. His takedown defense is not all there. There's also someone who's very similar, all the way from Sweden. I think it's Anton Turkal. I think that's how you pronounce it. He's almost like a twin to Luke Trainer, but he's a lot more aggressive, a lot more unpredictable. He dives for risky moves all the time, and he's willing to trade shots with the opponent on the feet. It was looking pretty dicey for the light heavyweight division if I were to pick one of them two, if I'm going to be honest here. I mean, those two guys may be something in the future, but I wanted to see someone who's more well-rounded, who's more polished. And finally, I did find the top prospect for the light heavyweight division, and he's actually in Khabib's organization, the 24-year-old, 7-0 professionally. Almost all his wins are by finish. All the way from Kazakhstan, DR Nurgozay. I was so glad to find DR because he is so well-rounded. He can be pretty slow in the stand-up, and he can be a little bit too patient, but at the same time, he doesn't like to back away from the opponent. He's almost like a brick wall in front of them. He has insane power in his hands and his kicks, and also deceptively flexible kicks. And what's not deceptive is the way he looks. You could tell this guy can take a punch, and he absolutely can. He is so durable. Just looking at the size of his neck, you know he could take a sledgehammer to the face. But there is also another deceptive part of his game. He looks like he would be a brute in the wrestling and the striking, like he overpowers the opponent, uses his strength against them. On the ground, he's actually pretty fluid with his grappling. He flows through scrambles, and so fast on his submission attempts. His arm bars and omoplatas are something not to overlook when you go on the ground with this guy. Him on his back, him on top, there is no safe place when you're fighting DR. And finally, we go to the heavyweight division. Honestly, outside of what the UFC has, there weren't a lot of great prospects. The UFC currently has the best prospect in the heavyweight division, and that is Alexander Romanov. 31 years old, he's the oldest guy in this list, 15-0 professionally, 6 knockouts, 8 submissions, 1 decision, 6'2" in the 75-inch reach. Even though he's kind of short and lacks the reach for an average heavyweight, he's extremely strong and heavy for the weight class. I believe he cuts down to 265. Nobody wants to get in a clinch with him. You're going in for a ride if he gets his hands on you. Not so much of a striker as he's more of a grappler than anything else, where he puts a lot of emphasis on the way he takes you down. He has throws, trips, double legs, single legs. He has a plethora of different kind of takedown techniques that you don't normally see from heavyweights. And his top control looks suffocating, man. No matter what the position he's in, he's always in a position to submit you. And his submissions can be very strange to watch. Multiple of his wins are by a forearm choke, for an example, where he literally gets on top of you in your guard or even in mount. He puts his forearm into your neck and leans his weight on top of it. Not only that, he's good with the arm triangles, all the strongman submission attempts you get from heavy fighters. I can absolutely see Alexander Romanov being a top 5 fighter for the heavyweight division. That completes the prospect list for 2022. High expectations for a lot of these fighters, and again, there's many others out there. And make sure to leave in the comments who you think are the top prospects of this year.